you say death is temporary and that I'm going somewhere. Why am I wrong?
Well, actually, the reason the universe exists, from my standpoint, is what we're doing right here now. We're living these lives. The point that I try and make is that we can live these lives better when we realize that we're more than just one little physical incarnation, birth to death.
Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon, shares a remarkable transformation in his perspective on life and consciousness. Many patients have told me that after cardiac arrest, they found themselves in breathtaking places where they reunited with deceased loved ones. I always attributed such experiences to brain malfunctions. But everything changed when I fell into a week-long coma due to a severe illness, he recounts. During this time, Alexander's brain was effectively inactive. I compare it to a television unplugged from power. The screen goes dark, he explains. Yet, despite this lack of brain activity, he found himself immersed in an extraordinary world. It was so vivid and real that it made earthly life feel almost insignificant. Though I now treasure it even more, understanding its profound value, he reflects. This experience led him to believe that the death of the physical body does not mark the end of consciousness. About a decade ago, when his body lay in a coma, his awareness was enveloped in complete darkness. It wasn't an ordinary darkness, but a dense, murky void, which Alexander likens to the world as a worm sees it. In this strange environment, he initially lost all sense of identity. He felt like part of this formless mass, until a shift in perception made him realize he was simply within it, not a part of it. Determined to escape, he focused his thoughts, and faint rays of light appeared from an unknown source. Concentrating on the light, he discovered what seemed to be a small opening. With intention alone, he began to ascend rapidly toward it. Breaking through, he found himself in an entirely new realm, a place so vivid and beautiful, it felt like being born for the first time. Hovering above this world, Alexander observed landscapes resembling Earth's forests, fields, and lakes, though the place felt both familiar and otherworldly. It was as if I had returned to a long-forgotten memory, a place I didn't realize had always been within me, he describes. As he traveled, he saw people wearing simple yet elegant clothing that harmonized perfectly with their surroundings. Communication didn't rely on words. Instead, understanding came as deep, intuitive revelations. He felt enveloped by unconditional love and knew he was being watched over, free from fear. Still, he sensed that his time there was limited. Eventually, Alexander found himself back in the darkness. Fragments of his earthly life began to resurface, disjointed at first, but gradually becoming clearer. He remembered having a family, though he couldn't recall their names. Seeking the light again, he realized the opening had closed. When I awoke in the hospital, life initially seemed trivial, he recalls. But that feeling quickly faded as I recognized the deeper purpose of living. His experience taught him that earthly existence revolves around spiritual growth. Through the choices we make between good and evil, we evolve spiritually. He believes love and compassion are at the core of this journey and shares these insights in his book, Proof of Heaven. In 1965, I first heard the astonishing story of Dr. George Ritchie, recalls psychiatrist Raymond Moody, renowned for his pioneering research into life after death. At the time, I was studying psychology and was skeptical about the idea of an afterlife. However, Dr. Ritchie's account profoundly altered my beliefs and inspired me to explore this phenomenon seriously. The events that George Ritchie experienced in 1943 remain extraordinary to this day. At just 20 years old, while serving in the military, Ritchie developed severe pneumonia and was declared clinically dead for 8 minutes. He later recounted his incredible journey in his book, Return from Tomorrow. Ritchie's story began with a sudden descent into illness during his military service. When he succumbed to pneumonia, his body lay lifeless, but his consciousness remained intact. Perhaps I was shown these visions to help dispel misconceptions about death and ease fears surrounding it, Ritchie would later reflect. Initially, he regained awareness in his hospital room, feeling strangely rejuvenated. Determined to inform the medical staff of his recovery, He walked into the corridor where he saw a doctor carrying a tray of instruments. Calling out to the doctor, Richie was stunned when his voice went unheard, and the doctor walked past him without acknowledgement. Things took a surreal turn when Richie noticed the doctor wearing a ring inscribed with 1945. Confused, he began to realize that something extraordinary was happening. Overwhelmed by feelings of isolation and uncertainty, he thought of his family, longing to be with them. In an instant, his thoughts seemed to propel him beyond the hospital walls, and he began moving at incredible speeds, faster than he had ever imagined possible. I saw the lights of cities below and felt drawn to them, Richie later described. Suddenly, I found myself on the sidewalk of an unfamiliar town. As he stood in the cold, he noticed a man adjusting his coat to keep warm. Richie attempted to speak to him, only to discover that the man couldn't see or hear him. This realization that he was invisible left Richie feeling deeply disoriented. Even if he returned home, he understood his family wouldn't be able to see or hear him. Lost and lonely, he decided to return to the hospital. Once there, he attempted to interact with his body, trying to remove the sheet that covered it, but his efforts were futile. As he grappled with confusion and despair, the hospital ward began to flood with a brilliant, otherworldly light. Initially assuming someone had switched on an additional lamp, Richie quickly realized the light's source was not human. The brightness was indescribable, as if emanating from countless welding sparks. Then, within the radiant glow, a being made entirely of light appeared before him. In that instant, the hospital walls seemed to dissolve, and Richie's entire life unfolded before him in vivid detail, from his earliest memories to the moment of his death. This life review was just the beginning. Richie found himself transported to what he described as other dimensions, realms where souls journey after death. The first of these was a place near Earth, inhabited by souls burdened by loneliness, anger, and unresolved conflicts. Richie referred to this realm as the abode of unhappy souls. What happened next in George Ritchie's extraordinary journey remains a powerful testament to the mysteries of life, death, and the possibility of something beyond.